Okay, let's get started. Today's webinar is about inflow accessibility, preventing backlogs, and increasing velocity. Again, my name is John Avila, Chief Accessibility Officer at Level Access. I've been with Level Access for over 25 years. One of my roles is a thought leader here. And at Level Access, one of my personal responsibilities is making sure that we build and procure things that are accessible to our customers and our employees with disabilities. And that includes the topic that we're covering today, making sure that we develop software that is accessible, that is born accessible. In addition to accessibility internal efforts here, one of my roles is to be involved with the W3C and creation of web accessibility standards like the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. I will now pass it over to Sukhada for introductions, and then Travis.
Hi everyone, this is Sukhada Pawar. I'm a senior product manager here at Level Access, and I help build developer tools for accessibility. Over to Travis.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Sukhada. I'm Travis Marasca. I'm a senior solutions engineer here at Level. I take the great things that John advised and Sukhada builds and help provide a fit for our customers to have success. So former engineer, but now working on this side of the table. So I'm really excited about today's talk.
Great, thank you both. So just a quick word about Level Access. Level Access has been leading the industry for over 25 years with digital accessibility solutions. We have a great team of subject matter experts combined with technology, including AI agents, to create a hybrid intelligence solution to assist our customers in creating inclusive experiences. We work with all sorts of organizations in different industries, from government and education to software, finance, etc. We work with the 5 out of the 10 Fortune companies and 30 plus out of the 100 Fortune companies. We are truly a global company with people from over 25 countries and over 500 employees. We're also very much involved with our accessibility industry, helping to create new standards like WCAG3 at the W3C, and also a founding member of IAAP, the Industry Association for Accessibility Professionals. Moving along to today's agenda. First, we'll cover the return on being proactive with accessibility, followed by why early detection of accessibility issues isn't enough, and then we'll provide a framework for accessibility progress, followed by a live demonstration of Level CI and some other exciting tools. And then lastly, we'll have some action items and key takeaways, and then finally some time for questions. So let's jump into the return on investment of proactive accessibility. This is really important because there is a real impact on accessibility when issues are introduced into the development process and you have to fix those issues later. It's very reactive. Often the fixes are become emergency situations. Accessibility is sort of an add-on, and accessibility really isn't at that point a quality of the work being produced. And ultimately, when accessibility issues are introduced and then have to be fixed later, it's just creating technical debt. There's no predictability. It's very unmanaged. And unfortunately, it's what I'd call like a fire drill. And so really proactivity will reduce and prevent regressions, or reduce technical debt, and help to stabilize the code base. It also saves time and money. And we every year we do a state of digital accessibility report. We send out a survey, we get information, and we hear from senior leaders and practitioners in the field. And what we learn is that when accessibility is addressed after the fact, there's a 10 to 30 time cost associated with addressing accessibility after the fact. If you were to release the site and then have to go back in and make it accessible afterwards, it could be a 4 to 6 month lag time before it's fully accessible. And not only does that increase risk for the organization, it also means that users with disabilities can't use the site fully at the same time as everybody else. So it's a user experience issue, it's a compliance and risk issue, and it also prevents folks from focusing on new features because you're addressing accessibility later. When I talk to sometimes some prospective customers, they'll say, okay, we're building a new site. Once the sites are ready, then we'll have you test it, or then we'll start testing it for accessibility. And it's like, well, that's actually too late. It's great you want to address accessibility. That's the right thing to do. But you need to be thinking about it from ideation, design, and development. And today we're going to be talking about the development aspect. What we've heard in our surveys is that the challenge is the number one challenge is there just isn't enough time. There's competing priorities, competing needs for other features. And so if accessibility is not part of the acceptance criteria, if it's not part of the build process, if those things aren't in there, then it becomes an afterthought rather than just something that happens organically or naturally. So Travis, what are your thoughts? Testing really is just a table stakes. So why is early detection of issues not enough?
What we're really seeing from the data is that developers are already testing earlier than they were just a few years ago, right? Like John mentioned, anybody building a brand new website today, whether it's kind of baked into the frameworks they're using or just exposure to it earlier in their career, or whether it's a really hard defined requirement, they know about accessibility from day one, and they're testing earlier. So we've shifted left, but we're not fixing left, right? So as you can, the data kind of tells a story. What's on the screen now is it says 81% of developers say they start addressing accessibility in development or even earlier. But the data also shows that the percentage of websites, and this particular study that we've cited here is looking at the homepage only, but it's the number of accessibility issues or the sites with accessibility issues just on their homepage or their window to the world has only decreased by 3% in the past 7 or 8 years. And we keep throwing technology at the problem earlier left, but it doesn't seem to be or hasn't in the past really been aligned with these efforts in showing what's actually showing up in delivery. So you can imagine this is going to be similar on SaaS systems or mobile apps, et cetera. So if issues are still escaping into triage or backlogs or retesting, then we've improved timing, right? So we're testing in our pipelines or in our IDEs, but we haven't really made an impact, and it's really just creating noise. So a little bit about what we're going to talk about today and show in a demonstration is how we can get our arms around that problem and take that early detection further to where we thought it was going to go. What's really going wrong, right? To start, and we're going to read these boxes kind of down first on the left-hand side, but it's really not just one dramatic failure and one easy silver bullet fix. it's a series of small workflow gaps that that start to add up. And for most of the customers or prospective customers or even just like colleagues in the field that I speak to, it's not embedded deeply enough in the build process. Detection might be embedded, but signaling and reaction and being that sort of inflow in context fix that we might see with things like security or performance, other non-functional requirements that teams are more accustomed to, really just isn't there. So it stays separate. Developers don't get that just-in-time guidance that they need to react to it, and it kind of just slips away and becomes technical debt, for lack of a better term. Really, I think the next failure, not to use such harsh terminology, but the next gap really is guidance. Sukhada, would you agree?
Yeah, so I feel over the years, the CI pipelines have got really sophisticated. And as you said, security testing, performance testing are become something which are automated in the CI pipelines. But accessibility is still looked as something which is out of this CI flow, right? Something which needs to be audited at the end of the year. And what happens because of that is like when you really get that audited issue, you have really less context of what that issue is about, right? And that's our second point. That teams lack just-in-time guidance because you need to find a root cause of where exactly that issue was found, maybe 7 months after it was created. Um, and that's the reason fixes are not landing the right way because when you get the issue, you probably need to go back to your designer, you probably need to go back to your product manager to understand the context of the issue. um, and that's the reason you need to have better acceptance criteria, which are missing in accessibility. In performance or functional issues or security, you have set of acceptance criteria which need to meet in order to make the code in production. But accessibility really lacks that, and I feel accessibility also lacks having good uh, effective quality gates because quality gates are normally coded. They are not present in the UI, which a non-technical audience can set them up. Um, and hence, these quality gates are normally handled by the development team. The accessibility champion is not part of decision making in the quality gates. And the last point is about really having a proof of all these things which are doing to shift left, right? And I believe John has really good insights in this. And I would really love to hear John about how we can document proof about shifting left.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we've talked about finding the issues, fixing the issues, and then last is sort of this proof. And proof is really needed to support governance of a program, to show the return on investment, to be able to document for compliance purposes, and to show that the budget and continued effort is needed. Without those proof points, it's hard to say, well, were we effective? And in this case, we're not addressing new issues. You're not creating new issues. So essentially, the proof is we're not creating a backlog, or we have no backlog of accessibility issues, at least that can be detected automatically, and in the development process. And we have a log of what tests were run, when they were run, and we understand some intelligence from those data points. So as the issues are found during the development process and fixed, it provides you good intelligence to say, okay, here's the areas where we had challenges. These were the areas where we saw these were the types of issues that were most common. These would be good areas for fixing earlier in the process in planning, design, or training, etc. So those proof points are really key to understanding the investment. Okay, next we'll jump into inflow accessibility and provide a framework for accelerating progress.
Yeah, so with all the issues which we have seen right now, we are thinking of how we can build accessibility inflow in the development workflow. And we have a three-pronged approach for this, in which we are looking at the entire life cycle of how new features get developed, right? Suppose you want to build a new feature right now. You have the requirements, you have the designs, you have design patterns, design systems, all of that together for this new feature. At this point, when you're building a new feature, you have maximum context about what you're building. And that's the time wherein, whenever that's the time if you get accessibility issues, you probably will have a lot of context about it. And that's the reason we want to have PR level testing, which is a way in which you can find issues related to the feature you're building and not the accessibility issues which probably your colleague has added in the code. Right. So the first block talks about having PR level scanning, flag issues right at the time you're building features, flag issues as you add new code to the code base. And the second part is because you have a maximum context while you're building the feature, you probably can be helped by embedding remediation guidance in the pull request, right? So surface pull request suggestions or remediation guidance right in your ID, right in your pull request, so that you can sort the issue as early as possible and that does not turn out to be a regression issue or that does not get added after a year in your audit, right? And the third part is really enforcing these quality gates, right? We have quality gates for security, we have quality gates for performance. Your accessibility quality gates are quite important and they need to fail or pass your bills at a PR level itself, and this will help you to find accessibility issues early in your life cycle while you're doing a pull request, while you're building a new feature, and when you have maximum context about that feature. Now Travis can show us how what we are building level CI can help us help us in the inflow accessibility. So over to Travis.
Thank you, Sukhada. So yeah, what I'd like to walk you through, just a real quick high-level overview of this in practice, at least when we've got to commit stage or the pull request, right? Later, I'm going to hand it back to Sukhada to talk about even further left, more real-time, more contextual guidance that we can get around in and around our MCP server, so directly in your ID, et cetera. But I think one of the things that really just stood out to me, or it has over talking to customers and what was just framed up for us by Sukhada was context, right? That like mind Olympics that you have to go through as a former engineer myself, right? When a ticket's assigned to me and I open it up and I'm like, what is this? I don't even have this environment running. The list goes on, right? About just getting back into the context of even being equipped and read in on the issue rather than just a tap on the shoulder. Hey, small accessibility adjustment needs to be made while you're building, no problem. That's really what I think the title of this webinar suggests is we want to do this in flow and stop talking about where we're shifting or when we're doing it. We're still going to be involving humans to audit this because it is, much more than just a regular quality signal. It's a human thing, right? Like we're trying to make inclusive experiences, but we can do so much more, so much earlier with technology. So I'm going to run you through level CI just really quickly. And I like to kind of use personas in my demonstrations. I just checked the attendee list. We don't have anyone named Eric, but Eric is my senior developer that I like to talk about, who he's kind of just building a new UI feature, right? Accessibility is it's a non-functional. He doesn't have a specific story, doesn't know how to code for it, but he definitely is aware of it and knows it's important. And we're going to kind of see what working with level CI is like, and then when we go back to Sukhada, we'll see even earlier where this may have been detected while actually doing coding. I'm not going to walk you through setting up a new project, but give the context. Really, what we do, what you do is there's a couple dependencies, and then it's just access to your ALM or your application lifecycle management tool. Like for example, I'm using GitHub in this particular demo, Azure DevOps, whatever the flavor might be, and then some configuration with your end-to-end testing framework. And I will stay in my lane because Sukhada can speak more intelligently to it. But even if you don't have sophisticated end-to-end tests for your user interface, or maybe they're not in the place that you'd like to see them in the future, there are some other ways that we can still give you some really good signals about the accessibility of individual screens and screen states in your PRs. So for Eric, we're going to go into one of the projects that's already set up, and this particular PR, which has failed, and I'm going to Sukhada stole a little bit of my thunder on what I had to say about quality gates, but I'm going to frame that up even further when we go back here in a second to see really how the configuration of those gates is as important as issue detection, right? Because we've been detecting issues for quite some years now. What we really need is to operationalize the enforcement and the reaction to those things that we detect, which is kind of why we're here today. So looking at this PR summary right away, I can see we were using Playwright for this particular end-to-end test. That it's kind of agnostic of that. But we have right in flow here, I have 4 critical issues. I picked on the critical ones because we have certain gates set up here. I can go directly into an issue within the platform and have the typical where is the issue? What is the problem? Explain it to me like I've never heard of accessibility. And of course, give me the ability to interact with my team through comments and things like that, but also tell me exactly how to fix the problem. And if so inclined, give me some resources to learn more about the problem. Kind of going into what, I understand the what and where, but what is the why? Why do I want to do this? Why do I want to learn about this so I can roll it into my future development? When we get into the actual issue itself, so now I'm in the repo, and what we're seeing here in both in PR decorations and comments, et cetera, if we have access to the repository, we're going to get an actual fix that is, so not just the problem itself, but what can I do to actually apply a fix? Now, somebody probably Sukhada has not given me the rights to actually apply these suggestions, but in many cases, depending on the code base and the configuration, these can actually be more of an agentic fix, human in loop sort of fix. This is the exact fix that we suggest. Do you approve it or not? Almost like a mini PR within a PR that we'll talk about in a little bit more depth later on. So where's the problem in the context, the tools that I'm already using? How do I fix it? And in some cases, just fix it for me. So this is pretty far left, right? We're in a build, we're in a feature branch. There's also baseline scanning on the main branch as well. So you can get sort of an overall view of the product or the feature. But for Eric in this particular circumstance, it would be if I was on the engineering team and I was trusted to make this application of a fix, I could just apply that immediately, or I could go back into my IDE, which would also have the context of these PRs and other information. But I'll spoiler alert for the MCP discussion that we're going into a little bit later. So one of the key things that we saw here, just going through Eric's workflow, so opened a PR, he had some warnings, not necessarily failures. The quality gates themselves are highly configurable. So these are just demonstration quality codes for different systems. But if you think about brand new code, which you see here, you could be very, very strict. For me, I trust this rules engine a lot, and as you can see, we have an even faster and more comprehensive rules engine coming into the product very soon. So I would say brand new development, going to test-driven development kind of philosophy, zero issues, especially zero critical issues. Fail the PR. There's no reason for a brand new thing to have accessibility violations because you're already signing up for tech debt. In the real world, we're going to probably have existing systems that we put this into, and we're going to want to start to get warnings and a comfortability before we start slowing things down by failing or by rejecting PRs and things like that. So you can set up these quality gates to kind of correct me if I'm wrong, right? But you can have unlimited customized gates that fit various different teams and their appetite for risk or how important accessibility might be at that point in time. Is that right?
Yes, it's correct. So you can have as many quality gates as you want per project, and then you also have this bifurcation of overall analysis quality gate and the new code quality gate, because we might want to have stringent quality gates for new code because we're just creating new code, right? And might have some maybe a lower version of it for overall analysis, right? With less threshold for that. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So again, brief demo, but just, for me and most people that I've talked to, this is inflow accessibility at the heart of it, right? It's getting the right signal in the right place and time, enough guidance to act on that, and of course a policy layer that helps protect the feature or the overall branch. All those things together, and it becomes just like breathing. Well, maybe not that easy, but pretty simple to react to and understand all of these signals. With that, I think I am going to go back and take over the screen share, and we'll continue.
Thanks for the demo. So the second part is like we saw how accessibility can be embedded in the CI pipeline with level CI, and we can find PR level issues with level CI guarded by quality guardrails, called as quality gates for new code as well as for the overall code. But what's an interesting trend which is happening is like using the power of AI. What we have observed is the integrated development environment which developers are using has changed a lot. So you have Cursor, you have Windsurf, all these are highly AI based integrated development environments, right? And it's time that accessibility also comes into the picture in this integrated development environment. And how it can happen is through these 3 points. So context aware analysis, something which I was speaking about before. Like when you're building a new feature, you have maximum context of that feature. You probably have spoken to your product manager. You probably have, had these refinement sessions which you have gone through with them. You have discussed with the designer what sort of feature you're going to build. So you have maximum context at that point in time. And with modern AI, you have the resources to pull all of these resources, like your design system, your Figma designs, your compliance related documents in your organization, your requirement documents together. And, of course, your accessibility engine, which in our case is Access Engine, telling you what issues it is. So this issue now has maximum context about the design, about the requirements, right? So it's quite important that, like we use AI to to pull in all this information. And this has become much more easier with model context protocol, right? MCP can help us actually pull in all this information from different resources and give us a lot of context about that one accessibility issue, right? Which makes fixing inside the IDE much um, helpful. Initially we had linters, but linters had very less context about other things like your design systems or your compliance related work which your organization is doing, maybe requirements which are specific to what your product manager has written in their requirement documents. And hence, fixes which come out of this findings are much more reliable, and these are something which can be found in your IDE. So that's the beauty of AI and how we can use it for accessibility. Getting context aware information, using the power of MCP to pull in all that information, and then fixing them right in your IDE while you're building that feature. Um, so now I'm going to show a short clip of how we are trying to build our first MVP with level CI and MCP, and we can play the video. So as a developer, I just have to say, hey, level CI, can you find all the A-level accessibility issues in the branch? And it goes to the branch. It's running the accessibility scan, finding all the issues which might be present in my branch, and it's summarizing all the critical issues for me. So if I see I have these 5 critical issues, and it's giving me information like, what was the location, what is the code snippet which this issue is adhering to, what is the fix for this issue. So now the model has a lot of context already, right? And now if I query saying that, can you fix these issues for me? Hey level CI, can you fix the issue for me? So it can fix the issue right in the context, in the IDE for me, right? So it's exploring all the data which it has, and it's making the changes for me right in the code, and it's telling me what exactly it has fixed. So as a developer now, I just have to find what issues, what suggestions the AI has made, and just commit the changes as easy as it gets. So yeah. So this is how MCP is being used in level CI. We want to make it much more stronger, as I said, by getting as more context as possible in the IDE for you all, maybe to pull design systems and all of that together. And that's where I feel accessibility is really heading in the IDE. When I speak to engineers, I feel 80% of them will agree with me saying that, um, the most important part for them is that they work in the IDE all day. So if they get accessibility issues while they're working, that's the most important part for them when it comes to accessibility. Now, we have spoken a lot about having accessibility guidelines in CI in your IDE. But generically, if I think about what action items a firm needs to do in order to, shift left in accessibility or bring accessibility to their development teams, one thing which I can think about is make guidance available, as I said. Make guidance available where they are working, which is in their ID, which is in their pull request comments, right? You cannot have accessibility as an audit process at the end of the year, get all those issues and then assign all the issues in the backlog and expect engineers to, find fixes for those fragmented issues. The second point is to implement quality gates. As we do for security, as we do for performance, I feel accessibility is as important and needs to have quality gates. It needs to fail or pass builds. Um, and the third point is um, validating user flow. And I would really like to get insights from John or Travis about this as well, about validating user flow.
Yeah, this is John. Going back to the idea of context and taking this back to the real purpose of accessibility, which is people with disabilities being able to use the same software as everyone else. And it's really important to understand the user flow, that end-to-end experience of users with disabilities who may or may not be using assistive technology, making sure that not just on the component level or the page level or whatever atomic level it is, but more holistically, from an end-to-end user flow perspective, is that experience accessible to people with disabilities? And and certainly understanding that while some issues are critical and some may be less critical, sometimes when you have low severity issues, you have multiple low severity issues in the same flow, it can effectively accumulate and create a more severe impact to users with disabilities and their ability to complete that experience. And ultimately, when it comes down to most of the legal requirements and regulations, while they may point to the standards, ultimately it's can a user with a disability complete the same access? Do they have the same access to the program, services, et cetera, as everyone else?
There you go. I was going to talk just a little bit about money since I'm the representative from sales, but we transitioned into KPIs. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about in my demonstration of Eric that I kind of forgot was we're talking about catching early, fixing early, delivering better products. The sort of underlying benefit there is that we have KPIs, right? We have team performance and how much can we deliver on our roadmap, and doing things the way that we saw earlier in our demonstration and Sukhada's illustration of MCP. Those things never become any type of organizational tech debt, right? There's not a ticket, there's not a meeting or another meeting. It's fixed. When it's fixed in flow, it's also fixed for very in a very inexpensive way. Eric fixed the problem. It's not a JIRA ticket. It's not a cause for concern. It's not risk exposure. So there's a lot of benefit other than just shipping faster and not having that end of year audit that creeps up on us to just like Suk mentioned before. Accessibility is just as important as some of those other quality signals, those gates that we have, bundle size, dependencies that have security problems, all of the things that we're just used to reacting to. Accessibility is on its way to being just like that.
So this is John. I can jump in with some of the key takeaways from today, and I would say what's striking to me is we hear about accessibility as a project, or we hear about terms like progress over perfection, and I think it's very easy for teams to get like accessibility burnout when you're like, okay, we're going to spend these sprints working just on accessibility issues. It can seem like, okay, we're putting everything else aside. This isn't sustainable. And then you start to get pushback against accessibility. So I would highlight, that this approach is really about sustainable accessibility, where it's done in a way that is just part of the everyday process, and it's just part of that acceptance criteria. And so because of that, it reduces the burden, or the perceived burden, and the perceived distraction, and so that's really key to long-term adoption in organizations.
I love two words there, John, that you used burden and distraction, right? Like it doesn't need to be that. And our second point here is, like we've illustrated and talked about today, um, just meet engineers where they are. Everybody listening to my voice right now, either in the present or in the future, cares about accessibility, but it doesn't need to be distracting and handled so much differently than all the other things inside our workflow. So that's really a key takeaway, I think, for engineering teams specifically about what we've talked about today. So again, early detection is absolutely progress, right? Like we've been saying we need to shift further left for years, but there's really more to it than just being aware that there's a problem earlier. It's let's just go ahead and react to it in flow with the context that Sukhada explained pretty brilliantly earlier.
So I feel the AI accelerates development velocity philosophy really holding good. As we have demonstrated, like MCP has the is in the right place to solve the problem of accessibility in the integrated development environment for developers. And it does this brilliantly by pulling in a lot of context from design systems, requirements, compliance documents. So when the issue has a lot of context, the fix for it becomes much easier for the AI to do on its own, right? Um, and embedding accessibility in the IDE is the next big thing for developers because that is where they work. And if we can have something within the IDE for developers, that'll create a lot of improvements in how we are approaching, accessibility for developer workflows. Um, so the
Yeah.
end goal isn't few remediation tickets. It's building accessibility experiences by default, and that can happen only when you're looking at accessibility as a starting point while you're thinking of building a new feature, while you're creating a new feature, and while you're designing a new feature, right? Not at the end, at the yearly cycle of your accessibility audit. Yeah. So
This
any insights here?
this is John. Yeah, I'll just jump in. Yeah, I think originally, people used to track how many issues have we fixed, how many issues are still open, and then that shifted to how many issues did we not create, how many issues were not created, and now it's really shifting towards just things are accessible from the start. There's no issues that are automatically detected um, from the get-go, and so then the focus really can be on really improving that experience for everyone, and instead on focusing on some of these basic things that were highlighted in that web aim survey. Right, we still see basic things. The top 5 accessibility issues are still here today that they were when the survey was started 6 years ago. So instead of focusing on those, we can actually focus on the issues that really are more complex and more impactful, and actually will be a differentiator. Again, it's about users with disabilities being able to access things, but software companies, if you're building something, you're probably selling it to another company, and that software, and that's your revenue. And ultimately, accessibility is good for business. It's good for your business as well. So I think this really having accessibility as sort of the default is good for business, and ultimately good for people. Travis?
Thanks, John. Yeah, I think looking at the clock, I'd like to move into Q&A, but I on the IDE integrations, I did have one just quick thing to add there in terms of, I think I used the phrase meet engineers where they are with MCP and all of the context and that Sukhada showed. This means using the tools that your teams are using now or growing into, and your agents and your models is still going to be possible, because for those who aren't experts on model context protocol, that's really it's almost the orchestrator of all of the AI tools and sources of information that you'll have right there. So we're not trying to like trap you into a certain tool set or replace what you're already doing. This is really just designed to improve that workflow overall. But I am gonna stop talking and hopefully we can get to some Q&A. So give me one moment to see if there are any questions. Let's see here. So, all right, I'm gonna take the live questions that we have here, and I'm gonna just throw them out to the team. I think the benefit of me reading them is I don't have to answer them. But Sukhada, does Level CI work with Cypress as one of our live questions?
Yeah, we do have support for Cypress, but I guess what Nate is talking about, that he's already used it, or is he referring to the SDKs? So probably we'll have to have a conversation after this with him, because Level CI does support Cypress, and we have not found any issues with Level CI Cypress. Yeah.
Okay, great. And I could have answered that one because I think I used Cypress when I first started using the tool way back in the day, but I've moved to Playwright myself. Here's another question. For teams that still see accessibility as extra work, and that was put in quotes, what's the mindset shift developers need to make? Either one, John, you could answer that, or Sukhada.
John, you want to take it?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point. I think one of the challenges is in the definitions around what the acceptance criteria are. And so if people are seeing it as extra work, it's probably because it's not recognized by the team or the leadership as being a requirement, just like other things are required to be present. And so because it's not recognized by the leadership and the team, there's no consideration of the effort taken, or in this case, the tools, if you're having the right tools to reduce that effort. And so because of that, it's seen as extra work because you don't have the right tools, or you don't have the buy-in, and you don't have the allocation of the resources or time. And so I think ultimately, in addition to the tooling, the teams need to be on the same page around accessibility, have the right buy-in from the leadership in order for the implementation to ultimately be successful.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer, John. And one of the great things about quality gates is, I'll put a nerdy spin on that kind of policy that you outlined. Teams will be at the table and decide, what is acceptable and what isn't. So the question referred to extra work. So imagine we have a policy around unsupported NPMs or NPMs that have security issues. You could call that extra work, or you could call that's just, we're not going to allow this, so we have to update this. Accessibility will start to feel like that. Like, this doesn't pass, and there's really no complaining about, I don't know what to do. Clear signals, clear notion of this PR is not going to be accepted, and most importantly, context of how to fix it. I think with that's another sort of intrinsic value of the quality gates, is that it doesn't make this a nice to have or an I'll do it later, which accessibility has unfortunately been in some cases. Got another good question, I think. This is for probably Sukhada. Is there a MCP resource that provides up-to-date accessibility standards, guidelines, and best practices? enabling AI tools to reference them and generate code that complies with current accessibility requirements.
Yeah, so the current MCP which we have is actually referring to our engine, and our engine has the latest accessibility, knowledge. Of course, if we need more context related to org specific things, like as I mentioned, compliance reports or design patterns, we are going to work on that as well as in the version 2 of MCP. So as I said, it is referring to the same engine, and hence it has a lot of context about accessibility resources and how to fix issues, how this issue affects different people, what are the selectors which are affected because of this issue. So it has a lot of context.
Yeah, that was a resounding yes. For example, I'm not a full-time engineer anymore, but to the person who asked that question, this is exactly how I work, right? Like I use Cursor to help me with my rusty knowledge of JavaScript, but it refers back to our guidance for accessibility, and that's just my experimentation. So a very big yes there. I think we have time for one more question. What advice do you have for communicating the ROI of proactive accessibility to business leaders who just care about feature delivery? I think this is a good one for you, John.
So this is John. I'll just sort of jump on what I was talking about earlier. Is we're finding more and more in our State of Digital Accessibility report that we do annually that accessibility really is a business driver. It is necessary for doing business, whether you're in the US, Canada, Europe, or Australia, or anywhere else in the world at this point. And because of the global laws and standards, it's not just a competing feature, it's sort of a must-have. And so it's not really a feature, it's sort of like baked into what is expected. And so I think if people understand the requirement as accessibility in contracts, requirement of it from a regulatory standpoint, and from the user needs, from the user experience standpoint, and innovation that it provides, how many of us have used accessibility features that we benefit from, like captions or different modes like increased contrast or text to speech. We all benefit from those things. So I appreciate the questions, and it was a good conversation. Happy to follow up with anybody after the webinar. We do have our information here. We have QR codes for all three of us that will connect to our LinkedIn accounts. And so please feel free to connect with us and join us for future webinars. We will send out the recording later once we have made sure it is fully accessible. And have a great day, everyone.